Are you a solopreneur looking to 2 times your revenue to fund your lifestyle and give back? Well, this podcast is for you. We bring you inspirational guests sharing actionable tips to solve many of the struggles you face each and every day. And now over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Hello to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you enjoy it, please subscribe. If you're a regular, thanks for your support. Love to get your feedback at paul@buildlivegive.com. It means the world to me when you do. Our guest today is someone who was a drug addict for 3 years earlier in their life. And they truly hit rock bottom. They were lucky to have a batch laced, which broke the cycle and turned them towards a better life, including martial arts, which became a very positive outlet for them. They were let go in 2008 and went full-time into martial arts. He now leverages both experiences to guide leaders in human-centric leadership. So why listen? One is what it takes to be a human-centric leader. So important in these uncertain times. 2, how to bridge your business model from live to virtual events. Very important for a lot of speakers at the moment. And the 3rd one is how to be focused in these uncertain times. They've kindly given free resources, which are mentioned in the interview. So what I'll do now is hand you over to Jim Bouchard from senseileader.com. Welcome, Jim Bouchard, to the Build, Live, Give podcast. So great to have you on, Jim. How are you today?
I'm wonderful, Paul. Thank you so much for having me. I love visiting with you.
Yeah, look, it was brilliant to be on your show, Walking the Walk. Episode number 64. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And then I've repaid the favor by having you here today. So, something we always start with is what's something that your family or friends would know about you that we wouldn't?
Absolutely nothing. I keep it all under tight wraps. Actually, a lot of the people in the public probably know more about me than my family and friends sometimes because ironically, you know my story that I started this whole adventure really from life as a drug addict and a dropout. And a lot of them, they didn't know that about me at the time. I kept that very well hidden from a lot of the people who were closest to me. So that a little bit of a reverse of the question, I guess. Yeah,
okay. And look, it's like I know we're going to go deeper into your story, but how long were you on that path?
Well, the most serious part of it was, I say it this way, I lost a good 2.5, 3 years of my life to that, where, I just really functionally wasn't much good to anybody. And there's a lot of that. A lot of it I don't remember. I remember bits and pieces of things and some highlights and lowlights. But yeah, about 2.5, 3 years, which is plenty. I'm telling you, that's every day is precious, right? You don't want to lose 3 years of your life.
No. And how much in contact with your family were you through those 3 years?
Oh, not much at all. I really wasn't very close with my family. With my mom, I was. And so off and on. But like I said, I kept that well hidden. I lived quite a ways from them. So it wasn't like they saw me every day. They saw me a couple of times a year. So that kind of helped manage that, I suppose, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. And what was that turning point? What took you on the right path?
Well, the short story is this. I mean, there are a lot of little bits and pieces along the way, but I finally got to a point. We had a party. We lived in an old 1950s style trailer. It was one of those things with the louvered glass windows. It was quite a relic. And the only reason that's important is because at that time, I'd probably started doing 6 to 8 bong hits a day to stay high. That's a water pipe for people that don't have that experience. So I wouldn't smoke a joint or a marijuana cigarette, right? I couldn't get high on a joint. And at this party, somebody passed me one, so I kept it to myself. We call it bogarting the joint, right? We just old Bogart used to with his cigarette, right? So I kept it for myself, smoked it all down. And as much as I did, and I did a lot of other drugs to, keep the party going, to go up, to get down, all that stuff. But I was usually pretty mellow. But that particular night after I smoked the joint, I was running all over that trailer. And apparently I was trying to dive out through that louvered glass window. I mean, I would have been cut to shreds if I had made it. My friends got me calmed down after a while, got me put to bed. And when I woke up in the morning, I looked like I went a couple of rounds with Mike Tyson. And that was the day I said, that's it. I can't live like this anymore. And it's a good thing. What happened is whoever sold us that marijuana, the joint was laced with angel dust. And so very, very, I mean, several times during that period, but especially that day, I'm very lucky I even survived that and came out of it without, well, hopefully without noticeable brain damage, right? That's debatable, but yeah, that was it. Those are those moments, you look in the mirror and you say, where do I want to go from here? So.
Yeah, and when did you find martial arts?
A couple of years after that. I always say this, I say quitting drugs is easy. Most of us that do it, we get a little bit of practice at it, right? It takes a couple of times. But staying off drugs is very difficult. And I had some friends, and my brother was involved with martial arts and boxing as well. And they said, you should give this a try. I really think it would make an impact on your life. And it certainly did. And from there, I didn't realize I was going to make a life out of it. But yeah, here we are, 35, 37, I don't know, 37 years. Wow. After that, amazing. But that was a real turning point for me. It really gave me a sense of structure, discipline, recognition, right? A lot of healthy things.
Yeah, excellent. And was that your first business where it turned from a hobby into a business?
Well, that kind of happened out of necessity. It was
Right.
one of these periods, like people are worried very much now as we're doing this program, right? We're in the middle of the coronavirus epidemic. And it was a recession that was going on and very severely impacted broadcast industry. And I was working at a television station at the time, studying martial arts, but I hadn't really taken it very seriously at that point. Music was my life at that time too. I was actually, in addition to the television station, I was a musician almost full time at that time. But at any rate, yeah, I got laid off from the television station, and so I started hanging around the dojo most of the time. Right? Music was at night on weekends, so I just hung out in the dojo most of the day. And then finally, my master, my sensei, said, "Well, you're hanging around here. You may as well do something." And he got me into teaching. And a couple of years later, that evolved into my own center, and then we just grew from there.
Brilliant, excellent. And what was it? Instrument that you played?
Yeah, back then I played drums and had a lot of good adventures at the time. I mean, I was on the road full time for a little while, and got to play some major shows. I mean, it was funny. We would play a little pub with 20, 30 people in it, and then the next weekend we might be in an arena with 6,000 people, and then back to the pub again, right? I mean, that's the nature of that business when you're trying to make it. But lots of good adventures, met a lot of good people there. And it's kind of ironic because music actually played a part in me getting involved in drugs in the first place. But I continued the music through there. Now I just do it as a hobby, and I play instrumental surf guitar, so that's a lot of fun.
Excellent. And, unfortunately, as you said, we're in, COVID-19 at the moment. It's, probably unfortunately, the biggest pandemic since, the Spanish flu, and which actually never started in Spain, by the way.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. It was actually American soldiers that caught it and spread it, but because of the countries that were in war at the time couldn't actually communicate, and Spain was neutral. So they communicated some cases, and it then became the Spanish flu. But there are sadly going to be some people laid off at the moment, permanently. Any advice you can give going back? I know it was a while ago, but going back to your experience, what advice can you give about losing your career or maybe changing your career?
Well, I've been through that a couple of times, and actually what really got me into the speaking and leadership training field was 2008. I was starting to scale up because I was starting to speak a little more, but I still had one dojo that I owned, and that was my headquarters. And it was the first one I had, so my heart was there too. A lot of people had been with me through the whole thing. And 2008, we had a big recession. And the town that I had the school in also had a naval air station, which ended up closing. And that was more than half of our membership. Mm-hmm. So really couldn't sustain it anymore. All the money I was making speaking was going into keeping the school alive. And talk about stupid business decisions. One afternoon I walked into the dojo, and I had already talked with my wife. We were considering closing at that point. And this young mom came up, and she was in tears, and I didn't know what was wrong. And she had an autistic son, and she said he had gotten the first real good report from his school, that he was making friends, his grades were up, he was paying attention better in school. And she said, that's because of the program here. And And it just touched me so much. I went home and talked with my wife. We ended up taking out a second mortgage on the house, which was a foolish business decision. And we kept it going for a little while longer that way. But then eventually we get out, so I understand what people are going through. It's very painful, especially if it's something you built, right? And I hope this doesn't come across as trite, but because I've been through those things and been in a situation where I've lost everything, you have to make a decision. I'm not saying it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy, and it's going to be emotional. You're going to shed some tears. You're going to maybe throw a fit here and there, but make the decision. What am I going to do from here with whatever I have? And if I can dial back a little further, back to the drug thing, this is where I learned really the art of appreciation, if you want to call it that. When I literally had nothing, I didn't know whether I was going to eat the next day. For a little while, I was living out of my car, really. And somehow had the foresight, I think this did come from my mom, where I just looked around and started to be thankful for what little I did have. No matter where we're going tomorrow, it starts with whatever we have here and now. And certainly, how many great successes have been made, from that point, out of nothing. So there it is. And I try not to base my happiness on things that can be taken away from me, right? Because we never know, what can happen. So I hope that helps.
No, look, it does. It does indeed. And you talk about your mum, but who have been some of the other biggest supporters for you in your life?
Oh my goodness! One of the biggest influences on my life was I call him my brother by choice. He was actually my guidance counselor in school, in high school, and from there, just a lifelong friendship. We were roommates off and on for several years. He was the best man at my wedding, and brother by choice. Sadly, we lost him a few years ago to cancer, and but he was one that always encouraged me. And interestingly, because in my adventure in the martial arts, and then certainly now in leadership training and speaking, he always encouraged me to be a teacher. He thought, you should. I said, I really believe you should be teaching, and I always think about that because, no matter what shape it takes, I guess really that's what I do. That's what I am, right? Is a teacher.
Brilliant. Well, look, perfect timing for the build section, which is, as you said, you're speaking, and I'm really want to dig into how your business has changed. But, when people say, hey, Jim, what do you do at the moment? How do you answer that?
Well, before the virus hit, I would spend a lot of time out on the road, right, doing conferences. I do a lot of conference keynoting, workshops for conferences and for associations and businesses directly. That's changed a lot in the last couple of weeks. We moved a lot of that online. I mean, thank goodness we have this technology. Still in the process, and again, for people that are struggling with that was tough. I mean, we were looking at potentially our best year ever, and we saw that go to absolute zero in a matter of about 4 days, where the schedule was completely canceled or postponed. So our entire year was wiped out. But like I said, you look in the mirror and you got to make a decision. And our decision was, well, we have the tools, we have the equipment, thank goodness. We have the desire, we have the content. Let's take advantage of this technology, do what we can do, and move it online. And people have been very responsive. It's still a long way to go. And again, I'm only sharing that not for anybody to feel sorry for me, but because I can say from the heart, I am one of those people. I mean, if I say something like that, it's because I've experienced it. And if I can do it, you can do it. I'm not the most brilliant person in the world. I mean, it's right. School of hard knocks and roll up your sleeves and get to work. That's the university I attended.
Yeah. And what do you know about, or what have you learned around this pivot? And I suppose it's the bridge more than the pivot, but what have you learned about taking things online? What are the key differences between doing a live speaking and virtual?
Well, you and I talked about this. I love being in the room with people. I love hugs and handshakes. And I believe strongly, what I teach is human-centric leadership. What I help people discover is human-centric leadership and expand on that. And that, to me, leadership is the most intimate human relationship there is. And to do that without being in the same space with other people is very strange, right? And I'm hearing a lot of people that are making this transition feel the same way. Like I said, it's nice that we have the technology, but it doesn't replace in person. But having said that, I think what we're learning, and I don't know if I've learned it, but we're learning it, is how do we, how do we simulate that as much as possible, right? How do we try to preserve an intimate connection? And, and the story goes to the way you and I connected. There are a lot of people that work in your space that have been approaching me, and you were the first one that did a personal video and sent me the personal video. And in that video, I knew you had looked at my profile, you looked at my material, and that you knew a little bit more about me. And that was incredible. So you can use this technology to make a real connection. And I'm thankful that you did, because the first time we talked, I thought, I thought very highly of you. I thought, that you were going to be an important person in my life going forward.
Oh, brilliant. I really appreciate that. And you talk about human-centric leadership. Give some examples of how you make that change for leaders.
Mm-hmm. Well, here it is. We've actually created this character of an evil manager. There's a great difference. Admiral Grace Hopper said it so beautifully. I couldn't say it any better. She said, you manage things, you lead people, you see. And for too long, we've gone overboard on management. Management's important, don't get me wrong, but it's not leadership. Leadership is what we're talking about when we're dealing with people. And quick examples, for instance, a manager will motivate or try to. And that's not very complicated. I mean, you can bribe people with incentives, you can scare them, you can threaten them, and they'll get to an expected point usually. Leaders inspire. So if motivation is about reaching expectations, inspiration is about destroying those expectations, right, and going beyond them. A manager will delegate, and there's nothing wrong with that. You need to do that, match people with tasks, but a leader will empower. Make sure people have the resources they need, right? All the tools they need to perform at their best. And a manager will push or drive where a leader guides. And that's really, there's the connection and the imprint with Sensei, right? And if you take it from there, Sensei's job is really that easy. It's, simple, I shouldn't say easy, to inspire, empower, and guide people. That's what the best leaders do as well, isn't it? I mean, really, that's what you do. When you're at your best as a leader, you're inspiring, you're empowering people, and you're guiding them. So that's why you can see it. To me, it's a very intimate process, and the best leaders approach it that way. It's about putting people first.
Yeah, and I think, in these times, I suppose it's easy to get busy in the managing part of it. Mm-hmm. I come from a corporate background. I know what it was like. And, often you're faced with decisions that, it's easy not to make the tough call. I think at the moment there's people, really being forced to take a tough call. And as you said, you've got to make those decisions. What's some advice at the moment for those leaders that it's the first time they've really had to stand up?
Well, first of all, reach out and make sure you're connecting with people. Don't be an undercover boss. You know what I mean? You have to connect with people on a human level. And that speaks to this directly. Well, first of all, to backtrack a little bit, research is clear on this. People perform at their best when and only when they know their leaders care, right? Mm-hmm. That's it. I mean, like we needed research to tell us this, right? But at any rate, what people need from you the most right now is just that. It's caring. It's transparency. It's understanding that we're up against something tough. You don't want to hide it from them. You want to be as transparent as you can. And don't be afraid to be a little bit vulnerable. They don't want to see you, crying in your soup all the time. But there's nothing wrong with coming out confidently and saying, I'm worried too. I'm scared too. We're facing these challenges. Share those challenges with people. And I think it was General Pat that said, never tell people how to do things. Tell them what needs to be done, and they'll surprise you with their ingenuity. And that's a perfect sentiment for these times. You never know where the best solutions, the best ideas are going to come from. It doesn't always come from the C-suite. It might be the janitor, the person on the front lines. And I'm sure you've run into this in your work, especially as a corporate executive and whatnot, right? Most of the intellectual, experiential, and I'd say cultural capital of an organization exists where? It's not in the C-suite, it's on the front lines where people are actually doing the work. So you want to stay connected as much as possible and just reach out and show people you care.
Right. And who do you love to work with? Who are you working with at the moment?
Oh, we do. It's interesting because we were doing a lot of work in the healthcare space. Those people are pretty busy right now. So a lot of those organizations have put training on hold, at least for temporarily.
Yes.
We do a lot of work with credit unions. We do a lot of work with credit cooperatives and whatnot. That because here in the States we call them credit unions. When we're working with folks in Africa and Caribbean islands, they have a little bit different names for them, but they're community organizations. They're anybody that has that same philosophy that they're focused on, from a leadership perspective, focused on putting people first, their own people and the people that they serve externally, their customers, clients, and whatnot. So it's more of a philosophical thing that way if they're in alignment. And ironically, we've been doing a lot of work with the trucking industry lately in construction. And we see that same sort of mindset too. I said ironically because, of course, the truckers right now they're so important to us. You never notice them until right now. Everything that we need to eat, to survive, to get through this pandemic, it all comes to us on a truck. So thank goodness they have the courage and the stamina to stay out there and serve us. That's leadership right there.
And a lot of people are leading virtually for the first time. So what are some tips you've got for leaders that are doing that now?
That's a great question, and a lot of people have been asking that. And again, it's as much as possible try to connect through the technology. And what I mean by that is a lot of people will use this technology and how would you say it? Kind of hide behind the lens. Does that make sense? Where, right? You know what I mean? And we can't do that. It's harder work. There was just an interesting article out, I think Harvard Business Review did it, on the stresses of people in the Zoom meetings right now, because it's not the same as being in the room. You have to work harder. Even if you can see the person on camera, it's not the same. You have to work harder to read them, right? And understand their moods, where somehow there's a lot of nonverbal that goes on when we're in the same space. And that just doesn't come across through the camera. And so you do have to do that. And like I said, make it a discipline that you're connecting on a human level. Don't just open that Zoom meeting by saying, hey, let's go tick down the to-do list and see where our project status is. Ask people how they're doing. Ask them if there's something you can do to help them facilitate, make their life a little easier and do the job a little better.
Yeah, and I think, we're not having those face-to-face, but there still is video. Like you said before, and yes, I did send you a personal video, and I do that. Even my welcome messages now on LinkedIn, it's all me, personal message. How can leaders use video more to help lead at these times?
I'm going to defer to you because you used it better than anybody that I've seen since I can remember. I mean, that was really special to get that. And when you meet Alex, she'll say that she never hears me. She'll never hear me come downstairs, out of the office and say, "I got a message from somebody I don't know who's running a membership program, and I'm so excited." She'll never hear me say that. And I came down and I said, "This guy Paul Higgins sent me this very special video." I said, "I am so impressed." And you were the only call I took out of about 50.
Yeah, well, look, I think it's, there are some great platforms out there. Use Loom is a good one. Also, Dub is the one that we prefer to use. But I just think about, it's making those hard decisions, like you said. So, it's easy to send text. It's easy to hide behind text. But I have as a default, do video first. And, you and I are lucky. I've got a little bit more hair than you, but not a lot. So it's easy to go straight to camera. I don't have to worry about my hair.
We don't have to shower. I do have to shave because I get that Fred Flintstone beard, but yeah.
Yeah. So I do feel a little bit harder for the ladies listening now where, you have good and bad hair days. But honestly, just use video a lot more. And that helps with that human connection. Now, I've been in lockdown for 3 years because of my personal health.
Right.
And so I've just got used to the only way that I can communicate with people is through video. And there's no better time to start it. It'll be rough at the start. It's like anything you start with. I know, with martial arts, I remember the first class I took and I was so, petrified at looking at all these people and what they were doing. But, you end up getting there and video's the same. But I think that, I don't know how many, like you said, you don't get many, but still it's an underused thing. And just like I randomly just do a video to my team members. My team members are spread around the world, and just do that. It's not that difficult to do, And I think that's what creates those human connections at the moment. So what were you thinking as I went through that?
Well, and you're not making, an Oscar nominated movie either. A lot of people, and I'm guilty of that because I have a broadcast background, right?
Yes.
What I've learned with this type of format, people just like an organic message. I mean, I like doing the Facebook live streams, things like that. People just like that. And it's okay to stumble and bumble a little bit. That's what we do when we're in front of people, right? We're in front of each other. They don't expect it to be perfect, so don't let perfection stand in the way of it. Open the camera and go for it. And like you said, the more you do it, yes. And I believe it or not, I remember my first day in the dojo, to put on those silly pajamas and stumble around not knowing what you're doing, and then to make it worse, you're in front of a bunch of mirrors, right? The camera's the same way. People look at themselves in the camera, and if it's any consolation, I mean, I've been on camera one way, shape, or form for most of my life, and I still don't like the way I look on camera. So if you don't like the way you look on camera, you're not alone.
No. And even if you're shooting every day and it goes to nobody, leave yourself little messages. It's just the art of getting used to it. It's no different probably when I know both you and I, are podcasters. Now, I won't even go back and listen to my first couple of episodes.
Right.
But you just get more comfortable with it. And I do think this virtual world is here to stay in a lot of senses. I can't see. A friend of mine yesterday, a very senior executive, said, look, we just won't go back to people flying around as much as what there was.
Not as much. They did a poll recently and showed that people are really craving it. I do, because people are afraid we're going to lose that. Don't be afraid of that. We're not going to lose that. But you're right. It's going to take a much different shape. More often, we're going to be working virtually. And even for bigger events, like I said before the show, we're getting a lot of interest now with promoters that are putting together conferences virtually. I don't think it's going to replace it, but you're right. It's going to change. And if you don't adapt, if you don't transform, you're going to be left behind in business for sure.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, before we go into the live section, I'd like to help you to build your authority on LinkedIn in these uncertain times. Just go to blgclick.com and watch a pre-recorded free masterclass. You will learn 3 secrets. You'll learn the formula used by 1% of LinkedIn users to 10 times their views. You'll get 7 killer steps to turn views into likes and comments by your ideal clients. And you'll also convert likes and comments into relationships by getting 80% response rates to your LinkedIn messages. Just go to blgclick.com and watch my recorded free masterclass. And as Jim and I have been talking about, it is about human-centered connections. So our method is very much around relationships first. And I know there's lots of activities that happen within this, but what I recommend is you can get your virtual assistant to do a lot of those. And if you don't have a VA and you would like to learn about getting one, just go to blg.com/VA. So, Jim, the next section is the live section. So what are some of the daily habits that make you successful?
That's an interesting question. One of the things that I've learned how to do is to try to turn off the noise at the beginning of the day. And when I do that, because I can't say I'm an altar boy. I make a lot of mistakes, and I'm a very disciplined person, but sometimes I get off track. So if that makes anybody feel any better. But my general routine that really helps me be productive in the day is to get up. I do some exercises that we call them qigong. They're Chinese exercises, stretching, gentle stretching and moving, get the circulation going, get the lubrication in these old joints, right? And then meditation. And I have a very simple program. In fact, you know what? I'll add this to your landing page too for people who are listening. Excellent. It's called Sit Still, Shut Up, and Breathe. And that's all you need to do. I mean, meditation doesn't have to be complex, but the research behind that is absolutely terrific. Even 5 to 10 minutes a day can really make a difference in your life. And in these days, too, it's also good to note that it does, in fact, boost your immune system. But as far as in the context with what we're talking about, it turns off the noise. Focus is not it's not a process. I'm sure you've tried, right, to just force yourself to concentrate, right? How good does that work most of the time? Focus, and this is what I learned in my life as a martial artist, focus is a process of letting go, largely, right? There's that beautiful story from the Asian traditions. They'll take a jar of water out of the lily pond and put it on the table. Well, what can you do to clear that water? Absolutely nothing. In fact, if you agitate it at all, if you try to move, you try to manipulate it, it's going to make it worse. You just have to let it sit, right? And that's one of the lessons of that. Just let go of these distractions and detractions, and there's plenty of them. Or to bring it down to earth, I kind of updated it, I should say, and just say, look, there's enough people trying to screw up my life. I don't have to be one of them. So as much as possible. But again, we're not immune from that. It's the way our minds work. So it's just when something comes up that bothers you, to pay attention to it. The masters I studied with would even say to embrace it, right? And then let it go, then turn it loose. And that's good. Other than that, really, it's a process of exercise. And it's strange because I'm a very disciplined person, but I'm not the best person to learn scheduling from. I can work in a very flexible schedule and feel very comfortable. And a lot of people can't do that. So I'm not the best role model for that kind of thing.
Excellent. And, what have you learned, or what are some of the habits that you have learned through this experience of COVID-19 that you'll probably maintain on the other side of it?
Well, I'm going to say learning again, not learned, because I'm one of the things is very interesting, and it happened. I've been through it before, but for some reason didn't access my past experience like I would tell someone else to do. And that is that in these times we can get such a sense of urgency that we have to make changes so fast. We have to just bear down, and we do to a point. Don't get me wrong, we absolutely do to a point, especially if we're responsible for other people. But you do have to take the time, right? You have to carve the time out so that you can take this time for a break, whether that's a walk, or that's exercise, whether it's meditation. Because if you don't, right, if you start getting to a point where you're frazzled and you're so stressed out that you're not performing at your best, then what value are you to the people you serve, right? And I'm including family in that too, right? Family, your friends, as well as the people you're responsible for in your business or your job. We've got to take care of ourselves. And like I said, I'm relearning that lesson again, but that's the process of discovery in life, isn't it? Sometimes we have to keep relearning these lessons.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of people I'm talking to are talking about how simple life has become, and they're really enjoying it because, particularly here in Australia, if you've got children, some children do 4 sports, they've got school, so you're always on the go as a parent. But I think in these times, life's just become a lot simpler, and I found that people are a lot happier. So I think, there are great lessons to learn through this and to maintain the other side. And we talked about Alex earlier, who's both your life and business partner. She's listening right now. What would you like to say to her about the support she's given you?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to quote her. She when she introduces me, and when we meet in person, Paul, this is what she'll say. She's the power behind the throne. I'm just the product. Yeah, no, she's a force of nature. And it's interesting because it's not the easiest thing to be in business with a spouse or with a life partner. There are challenges there. And you think of anything that you would bring to bear in a business relationship, you have to magnify that. You have to be extra careful. You have to be extra caring. You have to reach out a little more. And no, the support she's given me throughout my whole life adventure. When she met me, I was at a very low point in my life, and we became very good friends. And she's just been there for me the whole time. Really, really appreciate her.
Excellent. Well, the next section's the give section. And what's a charity or a community you're passionate about, and why?
Well, because of my past, my glorious resume, right? I should have been dead or in jail so many times when I was young, when I was in my 20s and going through that. For some reason, I got connected a few years ago with incarcerated youth. It's actually sponsored by a friend of mine to go and speak at a youth detention facility. And before we left the facility, she had talked me into volunteering as a mentor there. And I just fell in love with these kids. And I saw a lot of myself in them. And I saw a lot of, my past in their lives. And so I became more involved there, and I still do mentoring actively with them. We do a lot of work to support them. I serve on a board that provides resources for them when they're getting released, or if they're still inside and they're going out for jobs, or they just need something to connect with their family, all kinds of things like that. And then we've got a leadership program launched at this facility, and we're going to take that to some more facilities now. It's been working so well. It's tremendous work. And I hate this because it sounds like a cliche, but it really isn't. That's one of the joys in my life. It's been sad because we haven't been able to be in the room with them lately. And that's been really tough. It's been tougher on me, I think, than them, because every day I work with them, I take so much away. These kids are so resilient. Most, the kids I work with, not all. I mean, you can't save everybody in a situation like that, but by and large, the kids I work with are just remarkable. And it's so gratifying to see them really embrace this process of transformation and really change their lives, and some from some very, very horrible experiences.
And do you think if I just quickly ask that question around leadership and human-centered leadership again, do you think you need to have walked in someone's shoes to be purely an authentic leader, or do you think you can learn it?
Learn the leadership, or learn the empathy?
Learn the experience. Like, because you've walked in their shoes, I think there's an instant connection and a trust. Do you think that's important in a relationship?
Yeah, well, it certainly helps in that particular relationship because of my experiences. It gives me a level of credibility with them that someone who hasn't had that experience might have to work harder to get, right? But on the other hand, you still have to back it up with caring. I'd say this, though, in a general sense, leaders, particularly today, I mean, the age of command and control is dead. It's over with. Not that it was ever really, we could go on about that for hours. The best leadership has always been human-centric leadership, and we can find examples throughout history. But having said that, leaders need to discipline themselves to be compassionate. When I hear somebody say, I can't imagine what it's like, fill in the blank, right? Your experience, no matter what it is. Well, of course you can imagine it most of the time. In fact, these days, even the most horrible things you could think of that somebody went through, for goodness sake, people have written books and produced movies about it. You don't have to imagine, you can see it. Now, that's not the same, granted, as having lived that experience, but it gives you enough information, right, that you can, to a degree, walk in that other person's shoes if you choose to, right? And that's the thing. It takes a little bit of time, and sometimes it's a painful experience to walk in somebody's shoes, as you put it. But I do believe that's necessary to really be an effective leader. As much as possible, whoever is in front of you at the time, put yourself in their place, right? Before you start to do anything else. If you can put yourself in their place, you're going to make a much deeper connection.
Excellent. Well, the last section is the action section. We'll ask you some questions and get some rapid fire responses. So the first one is, what are your top 3 personal effectiveness tips? Well,
the first one, and this is probably the greatest gift that I took away from my life as a martial artist, is this little bit of philosophy is perfection is not a destination. It's a never-ending process. And that means we're continually working on ourselves. And the best, and I'm sure you continually have this experience, right? Aren't the best people you work with the ones that are constantly wanting to improve even more?
Yes.
Right. That's it. Second one, it's funny because when I meet some of my black belts once in a while now, because I haven't run a school, I think in 5-6 years, and they'll say, hey, Sensei, do you miss us? I said, hell no, I don't miss you guys. I miss the little guys, my little dragons, 3 to 6 years old, right? Now with those guys, I used to play a game pretty regularly. I'd yell out, what are the 2 most important words in the martial arts? And they would yell back, pay attention, right? Now I'd argue that those are the 2 most important words in life and in business too. And I heard this great quote not long ago. It said, the greatest gift you can give another human being, as long as we're in the giving section, right? Greatest gift you can give another human being is your attention. You see? So pay attention. And that's a discipline. And that requires a lot. Simple, not easy. And the final one, I think, is really timely. It's one of our strategies that we share all the time in workshops is be flexible, adaptable, and comfortable with uncertainty. Because, what was it, Pliny the Elder, the ancient Greek, he said, the only certainty is uncertainty, which sounds kind of stupid till you really think about it. And it's very, very profound. The world is changing and at a rapid pace, like you said earlier, and it's accelerating. And in fact, that's part of the reason I share my story as a drug abuser, because, what the heck has that got to do with leadership? What's it got to do with good people, And I always share, well, it's this. The best leadership going forward, now and going forward, is transformational leadership. Let's help people change, adapt, become comfortable with this uncertainty. And came to realize, maybe I thought my resume was a pretty bad one. It's a pretty useful one, because who better to talk about this and share this than someone who had to learn this process in order to survive, right? And so that's the value that came out of that. So be flexible, adaptable, and comfortable with uncertainty.
And the next is, what is your key piece of technology that is essential to running your business?
Boy, I hate to fall back on something so trite, but it's It's this computer and an internet connection, isn't it? I mean, this is it. Thank goodness for Mr. Mac. His name was Steve Jobs, right?
It was actually Steve Wozniak. Really,
Wozniak was the guy. Yeah, he was the brains behind the operation, wasn't he? Yeah. Jobs was the salesperson, right? That's good.
Yeah, brilliant. And your best source of getting new ideas?
Quiet. Yep, absolutely. Quiet. You've got to have quiet time. Now, there's a lot of input that goes there, right? I feel guilty if I don't read an hour a day, and access is, I call it Dashboard University. When I'm driving, if you're driving in a car with me, you're usually going to hear podcasts like yours. You're going to hear, inspirational things. But then you have to have the quiet time. And one of my greatest heroes, Ben Franklin. In fact, Alex bought me a Ben Franklin action figure that's hanging on my wall here as inspiration. He talked about that a lot. He said the great Einstein did too. He said his greatest ideas came when he was walking in the woods or playing his violin, right? So you need that quiet time. That's where the ideas start to make sense.
Yeah, and I love that analogy you spoke about before of the glass of water. I've never heard anyone articulate focus as well as that. That visual image really helped me.
I wish I could. It's a very old piece of philosophy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's the first time you can claim it on this show.
Okay.
You can definitely claim it on this show. And the last one's the big.
Now,
yeah. The last one's the big one, right? And I always leave it to the end. But what impact do you want to leave on the world?
And again, it's interesting you ask that question because that is something that I spend some time once a year asking two questions. And I ask leaders always to ask these questions, to take a day and really just reflect on them. And the two questions are, who are you, right? And really, who do you serve? And those two questions will answer that. What kind of impact do you want to leave? If I answer those questions, who am I and who do I serve? That's going to tell you the impact. And again, every time I've done that exercise, it might change someday. I don't know. But who am I always comes back to teacher. And who do I serve? Anybody who's willing to embrace this idea, particularly now because my focus is human-centric leadership, right? That they're willing to, they're going to do the work to attract willing followers, and they're going to have the will to serve them and discipline themselves to do that. And so that's the imprint that I want to make. Right now, I'd love if I had to, lay down my head tomorrow, and believe me, I've been close enough in my life as you have, right, to be intimate with that experience. I'm comfortable in the idea that maybe some people, especially the young people, will go forward as leaders. There's only two types of people in the world, leaders and those who refuse. And I want to help the people who want to be leaders. Brilliant.
Well, look, it's been such an enjoyable experience having you on the show. I loved being on your show, Walking the Walk podcast, and I was on episode 64, and we'll definitely have that in the show notes. But Jim has also given us a fantastic set of resources that we can all go and use. So there's a free book, there's a free membership with a monthly live call, and also there's a video on courage. And as he said, some great techniques on meditation. So you can just go to the senseileader.com/BLG. And once again, all those links will be in the show notes and everything else that Jim's spoken about. But Jim, it's been such a pleasure. I actually feel so relaxed just listening to you. And I know that that's come from, your two worlds. You were once a taker and now you're a huge giver. And really want to appreciate what you do for people and appreciate the time you spent on the show today.
Well, Paul, right back at you. And I'll tell you what, I wanted to do this earlier, but I really want to, from the heart, offer an endorsement because, again, unsolicited, you shared some tips with me about how to operate on LinkedIn. There was no pitch. You just shared tips with me, and those tips worked. I mean, that's terrific. I thought that was extremely generous. I really encourage people to access, your resources and your program. Take a good look at you. It's been a blessing to connect with you.
Brilliant. I feel the same. Thanks a lot, Jim, and have a brilliant day. I thoroughly enjoyed that interview with Jim, and it was so important in these uncertain times. I love that analogy he had of the glass of water, the best way that I've ever heard anyone speak about focus. So you can get all the show notes at buildlivegive.com. If you believe someone would benefit from the show, please share it. Jim would love to get your feedback and appreciation on LinkedIn. His profile will be in the show notes. You can also go to the senseileader.com/BLG to get those brilliant free resources that Jim mentioned in the interview. You can learn the 3 steps to build your authority on LinkedIn in a free pre-recorded masterclass. Just go to blgclick.com. Please take action to build your business and lifestyle and stay well.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. It would mean the world to us.